This is the World Organic News for the week ending 28th of January 2019. Jon Moore reporting. Decarbonise the air and recarbonise the soil. A little more housekeeping. Some of you will have noticed that the website is still down, and I'm still in discussions with my host about appropriate levels of performance. I hope to have the website up soon. In the meantime, I'm posting things to the Facebook page if you're interested. And now to the show. From the site Silvopasture comes a piece entitled, Silvopasture Can Mitigate Climate Change. Will US farmers take it seriously? A fair question. Quote, Steve Gabriel curls back a bit of flimsy net fencing and shakes a plastic bucket of alfalfa pellets. Immediately, a sweet-faced, short-fleeced mob of 50 Katahdin sheep pull away from the line of young black locust trees on whose leaves they've been snacking and swarm around him. The sheep race after Gabriel as he strides across nibbled grass and out from the fencing, around a dirt path's shallow curve and into a shadier overgrown pasture dotted with long-standing black walnut and hawthorn trees. End quote. A sweet image and one that can be replicated across much of the world. It does require a mindset shift from those on the ground. Not the easiest of things, but it is the people on the ground who can see the changes occurring as I write and then read this. There's serious fires to the south of us here in Highclere, emergency evacuations, watch and act alerts, and very little sign of rain. 2 days ago it was predicted we would receive 20 to 40 millimetres on Wednesday. Today, Monday, that forecast is now down to 1 to 5 millimetres. I've seen this pattern too many times in my life. Rain forecast, clouds arriving, and then nothing. We're fortunate here. We have a very small holding, 1.5 acres, and a permanent bore. We can destock, focus on the vegetables, and get through this, if this is not the new normal. Those on the ground see, I think we can all agree on that. It is the properties with multi-generational occupation with rainfall and temperature records that prove most useful. From small grape growers to corporate types, the harvest dates, temperatures at harvest and annual rainfall records all form part of their business intellectual property. Those in the southern parts of the Australian mainland are and have been buying land in the southern island state of Tasmania. It is cooler here. Whilst the mainland has been under 40 plus degrees Celsius for most of January, our part has hit 30 once or twice. The southern parts of Tassie have hit the high 30s, and that's where the fires are. So we have a dilemma. The rising temperatures and falling rainfalls are a consequence of climate change. Silvopasture, as one variation of regenerative agriculture, provides a solution in some cases. The nature of silvopasture is that it includes trees, obviously. Trees are a worry in bushfires. Now, there are ways around this, of course. Katahdin is a species which is fire resistant, as is, I believe, saltbush. So there are ways around it. Back to the piece cited. Gabriel, the person in the above quote, is an agroforestry specialist at Cornell University's Small Farms program. He is also the author of the book on silvopasture, a farming technique that's touted as a way to sequester carbon by growing trees in livestock pastures, end quote. Gabriel himself runs a 35-acre farm. He rotates meat sheep across fields once a day. Some of these have black locusts planted on them for feed, shade and nitrogen. The black locusts sequester in themselves between 1 and 4 tonnes of carbon per acre per year. And it's taken him 5 years to convert the place from a rundown to productive with huge improvements in soil organic matter and soil biology. And all the work has been done by the animals. This is the bit I like. Let the stock do the, in inverted commas, work for you by doing what they evolved to do. Stock go to the feed, they manure the ground and move on, almost as nature intended. The alternative, of course, are COFOs, confined animal feeding operations, feedlots, chicken and pig sheds, that bring the feed to the animals and take eventually the manures from the animals, all at the cost of fossil fuels. The differences are obvious. I understand that debt levels will affect decisions in and on farm management. I also understand that not everywhere on the planet can run stock outdoor all year. These cases can be opportunities to collect organic matter, but again the way is the most important. Slurry tanks and aerial spreading are not good in a carbon sense, but are technologies worked out and powered by diesel. You can see a pattern. Every time a technique is powered by a fossil fuel, it reduces the need for people and pumps carbon into the atmosphere. Silvopasture offers an opportunity dependent upon the landscape, the climate and the preferences of the farmer. To give you some idea of the wider range of possibilities of silvopasture, the piece goes on, quote, 14 miles south of the Gabriel farm, the 69-acre Good Life farm has had success with a peach and apple orchard grazed by beef cattle and poultry, supported by salad crops. About 180 miles east in Valley Falls, New York, first-generation farmers Dustin and Cassie Gibson have converted 20 acres of what Cassie calls useless woodland to silvopasture that supports beef cattle and hogs, thereby expanding the number of animals they're able to support on their total 70 acres, end quote. Now we come to a piece from Inside Climate News entitled Industrial Agriculture and Extraction Industry Like Fossil Fuels, a Growing Driver of Climate Change. Quote, industrial farming encourages practices that degrade the soil and increase emissions while leaving farmers more vulnerable to damage as the planet warms, end quote. This pretty much sums up the dilemma, yet there are of course people on the ground making a difference. Gabriel quoted above is one such example. In this piece from Inside Climate News, they bring us a fellow by the name of Seth Watkins. Quote, on his farm in southwestern Iowa, Seth Watkins plants several different crops and raises cattle. He controls erosion and water pollution by leaving some land permanently covered in native grasses. He grazes his cattle on pasture and he sows cover crops to hold the fertile soil in place during the harsh Midwestern winters. Watkins' farm is a patchwork of diversity, and his fields mark it as an outlier. His practices don't sound radical, but Watkins is a bit of a renegade. He is among a small contingent of farmers in the region who are holding out against a decades-long trend of consolidation and expansion in American agriculture. Watkins does this in part because he farms with climate change in mind. I can see the impact of the changing climate, he said. I know in the immediate I've got to manage the issue. In the long term it means doing something to slow down the problem, end quote. Seth is a holdout against the consolidation process that's been occurring with increasing rapidity since World War II. Rapidity might not have been the wrong word, but examples can be found as far back as the Roman Republic and more recently with the clearances of the 18th century. Clearly there are economic advantages to consolidation in industrial agriculture, but it is these very economic advantages which are driving climate changes. So it is time to do things differently. From the piece, quote, the industrial food system presents a barrier to realising the potential climate benefits in agriculture, says Laura Legnick, a soil scientist who has written extensively on climate and agriculture. We continue to invest in this massive corn and soybean and beef making machine in the Midwest, despite all that we know about the changes we could make that would maintain yields, improve farm profitability and deliver climate change solutions. This is happening as landmark government reports and ample academic research shows that agricultural soils are critical for stabilising the climate, end quote. There is, of course, a political element to all this. Where there are subsidies, there will be lobbyists and market distortions through price signals. These have led to investments based upon the subsidies, consolidations of farms, and then these rely upon the continued subsidies to maintain profitability. A self-sustaining cycle. No problem if there's no downside. In this case, there are plenty. Fossil fuel use, soil erosion, water contamination and animal cruelty are not bad starting points. All because the subsidies point enterprises into growing corn, soybean and beef. From the article, quote, agriculture policy has long emphasised overproduction, propped up by government subsidies that favour certain crops. Lawmakers have been unwilling to change the system largely because of powerful farm lobby and the might of agribusiness that profit from technological advancements. Farmers are dictated in how to farm, says Adam Mason, a policy director with Iowa Citizens for Community Improvement. They're locked into a system. This system has transformed agriculture into a business that resembles the fossil fuel industry as it extracts value from the ground with relentless efficiency and leaves greenhouse gas pollution in its aftermath." End quote. I would see this as an implementation of the Henry Ford factory methodology to the whole world, and we can do things differently. Whenever I get depressed about these things, I go and read a couple of quotes from Bill Mollison, and here we have them for your listening pleasure. Quote, "Though the problems of the world are increasingly complex, the solutions remain embarrassingly simple," which is always a comfort. And then further on, "The greatest change we need to make is from consumption to production, even if on a small scale in our own gardens. If only 10% of us do this, there will be enough for everyone. Hence the futility of revolutionaries who have no gardens, who depend on the very system they attack and who produce words and bullets, not food and shelter." End quotes. And on that note, I'll draw this episode to a conclusion. Remember, decarbonise the air, recarbonise the soil. A transcript of this episode will be available in the show notes, and of course the podcasting checklists are still available over at Jon Moore Podcasting Services. Thanks for listening, and I'll be back next week.